I'm going to be talking now about the archaeological offerings that we have here. So essentially, I'm going to be talking about BA Archaeology, BA Archaeology and Geography, Ancient History and Archaeology, and History and Archaeology. But if you're interested in history or interested in classics, feel free to stay with me. Something that's of interest to you guys as well, and it is it's a broad package that we have to offer here at Birkbeck. What I'm principally going to do then is talk briefly about the modules that I teach for archaeology in the first year, which is actually compulsory for most except ancient history, and an option for the ancient history folks. And then I'll go on and talk about one of my own research projects that we're doing at the moment. So my presentation is going to be much more sort of formal, traditional, if you like, compared to CATS. But we have a sort of a mixture of how we develop our teaching and learning skills here at Birkbeck. So, getting computers that work might be one of them. Ah, right, okay. It's jumping. Bear with me, sorry. Yeah, so the core module, one of the core modules for archaeology is discovering archaeology from field to finds room. It's essentially a basic module that takes us, as it says on the screen, from the field to the finds room. So from the process of surveying, finding sites, working through the sort of the records and things we need to put together beforehand, through the process of excavation itself, through then the sort of the finds analysis, through to the publication of the report and deposition of archive. So we take you through the entire process. A lot of people, when you ask them what archaeology is, they think of it as a practical subject. They refer to it as, oh, it's about digging. It's an active thing rather than something that's done in libraries. But in fact, it covers all sorts of different disciplines. It's a very multidisciplinary sort of subject. And discovering archaeology essentially gives you that overview to the whole of archaeology. So it's a very quick but very focused look at what archaeology actually is. It involves 2 trips, one to Avebury, the Stone Circle at Avebury. I don't know if any of you have heard it or even been there. I would strongly recommend it. Even if you're coming with us later on, still go. It's a fantastic place once we're allowed to go out, of course. Largest stone circle, it says there, in Britain. It's actually in Europe. It's over 5,000 years old. It's over a mile in circumference. Absolutely a massive, impressive place. You can see there, it's actually got a village pretty much in the center of it. And it's not alone, although it's got essentially 3 stone circles there. It's got 2 lines of avenues, again with stones paired all the way along them, one of which ends in a burial mound, the other one ends in another henge. And you can just see at the top of the picture there, that sort of strange pimple looking thing, that's called Silbury Hill. That's another Neolithic monument. It's the largest prehistoric monument in Europe. So these guys, once they get started, they just don't seem to help themselves. They just keep building and building and building. It's such a very different sort of way of looking at the world and experiencing the world that it really challenges us to think about the nature of human experience through time and how different we are. Because one of the things, if you come to my classes, you'll hear me talk about is I say that we are weird. We are Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And that actually is the minority experience of humanity. It's only within the last decade or so that we've become predominantly urban creatures. So the past and the way people lived and experienced it is very, very different. So the challenge for us is to try and understand how people lived, with the way they looked at the world, how they interacted with it and with each other. The other thing we're going to do with the other trip in the second term is the trip to the Museum of London, and there we go to look at some of the issues, in fact, that Kat's been talking about. In this instance, of course, the objects are primarily from London, so issues of ownership and cultural links and so on are, you would hope, not as challenging as they are perhaps at the British Museum. But we go there to look at the London Before London gallery, which is a prehistory gallery, because most people at your stage of learning tend not to have engaged much with prehistory. So, Egyptology, the Greeks, the Romans, you'll be familiar with the medieval period perhaps, but prehistory is a bit of a blank zone. So it's an opportunity to look at the sequence of prehistory and how museums can display it. And then we contrast that with Roman London, where there's an awful lot that's very, very familiar to us. So we can look at the contrasting messages that can be built into museum displays and collections. And there's a field school in the first year for archaeology, history and archaeology, geography and so on. And this year, sorry, it will be next year, your first year, will be essentially the first time we're working with the Museum of London Archaeology Service, that's MOLA, and we'll be working on the Thames, essentially, a field excavation based on fieldwork on the Thames itself. In the pictures there at the bottom, you can see them working on the riverside wall just by Tower Bridge, where erosion from boats going up and down has been damaging it. But people working on the Thames Discovery Programme, and we've got many students who've been working on it independently as volunteers. They found Anglo-Saxon fish traps. There's a Bronze Age pierhead or dock, perhaps, down at Vauxhall. And there are all sorts of objects and things being found all the time along the riverfronts. It's a great opportunity to see material culture from a great range of periods in a relatively specialized and challenging environmental context. Okay, so those are the two main areas in the first year of archaeology that everyone gets to experience. Move on now to my own research project that's ongoing. And it's essentially, I'm a Neanderthal specialist, I'm a prehistorian, and it's what can we understand from Neanderthals, given the removal in time and space and genetics from them. What can archaeology actually tell us about non-modern humans? The picture there is from the previous field school region. It's the Must Farm in Cambridgeshire, which you may have heard of. There's sort of Bronze Age artifacts. There's a Bronze Age village that burnt down and dropped into a river, so everything was beautifully preserved. Okay, so our Neanderthals then. What can we say about them? Remember, Neanderthals they suffer from being so close to us. They're our neighbors, but they're everything that you dislike about neighbors. We use them as whipping boys, as it were, to define what's bad. They're cannibals, they're thuggish, they're brutal, and so on. Even today, early today, I was reading about Joe Biden was talking about Texas for taking down the laws about wearing face masks. He called it Neanderthal thinking. So it pervades our culture, our society, this idea that Neanderthals are stupid, they're thick, they're violent, they're subhuman. And you can see reconstructions of Neanderthals from the past, and they are presented very much as nasty, brutish, and short. But is it actually true? Looking at the archaeology, they use the same tools that we do, they eat the same foods that we do, they live alongside us in certain parts of the world, in Eurasia, for over 200,000 years. They interbreed with us. If you're from Eurasia, the odds are you're carrying somewhere between 2 and 4% Neanderthal DNA with you. Some of us have predispositions to blood clotting diseases and things like this, which we've actually inherited as a result of our Neanderthal ancestry. So actually, how different are they from us? What's the relationship? Are they really these brutal, thuggish, thick people? Or are they, in fact, much more human than we give them credit for? Well, archaeology is beginning to suggest that this is what we're looking at. They are more like us. There's questions about whether they could use language or not, whether they sang, did they have music? Were they the first Europeans, the first humans to be adapted to northern climes, as it were? And we know that they had genes for red hair and so on. Did they wear clothes? Did they wear decoration? Well, there's archaeological evidence now for them wearing jewelry and decoration. And you can see some reconstructions there to challenge the ones you saw earlier, those sort of thuggish, ape-like creatures. My work is in a cave called Shanidar in Iraqi Kurdistan, in the north of Iraq. And it's a site that is, if you like, begins the rehabilitation of Neanderthals. It was worked on by a guy called Ralph Selecki in the 50s. He was excavating there. He found 10 Neanderthals who had been sort of variously done to death. Some were buried properly, some were killed in rockfalls and so on. But the key things he found was the flower burial, the so-called flower burial, which you can see a picture of in the bottom right-hand side, where an individual seemed to have been buried on a bed of flowers, not just a bed of flowers, but a bed of medicinal flowers, suggesting perhaps awareness of natural medicines and so on too. And on the left-hand side, you can see Shanidar 1, the skeleton. We'll look at him in more detail in a second. But if you notice that he's got a left arm, but he doesn't have much of a right arm. And that's because he lost it when he was adolescent, and yet he lived to a ripe old age. There's another Neanderthal skeleton there, Shanidar 3, who's actually been shot by either a spear or an arrow through the ribs, and he was actually resting up. He recovering from his injuries in the cave, when maybe a few weeks later, he then dies, perhaps from later infections or perhaps from rockfall. So we can see that Neanderthals in this picture are looking after people. They're burying people with flowers, perhaps with knowledge of medicinal plants. They're caring for people who are getting injured or perhaps even subject to violence and so on. And they're much more human in terms of their caring of things than perhaps we give them credit for. This is the Shanidar old man. On the left-hand side, that's the withered stump of his right arm. You can see his skull in the center picture there. The skull shows signs it was actually fractured. Someone smashed him on the head at some point, which would have caused him to be blind in his left eye and probably hearing impaired. And slightly later in life, he also then damages his leg and foot so that he would actually be far less mobile than other Neanderthals. And this is a guy, this is a society that is highly mobile. They make a living by mobile hunting. They move across, in this Iraqi instance, rugged landscapes, hunting large animals, and they get the damage. You can see that they're getting kicked by animals, they're getting tendons torn and things like this as a result of their hunting. So this guy would be a bit of a liability. He couldn't have fed himself, and he would slow everybody down when they're moving through the landscape. So, why would you keep him? Well, obviously because he is valued. He's valued. He's a key member of that society still, because he reaches a ripe old age for a Neanderthal. So he is actually a looked after individual. Our excavations have been going on now sort of about 5 years. And we've actually found the remains of at least another 3 Neanderthals. This is an extremely squashed Neanderthal skull and jaw. You can see it there, just about. It needs to be labeled because it's very hard to identify. You can see the upper and lower jaws on the right-hand side. The shiny piece of bone towards the top is part of the eye socket from around here. You can see the skull towards the back, the brain case at the back. You can see ribs right on the bottom there, and the right hand on the edge where it says edge of section. And there's a hominin tooth and a separate tooth. That's not this individual's tooth, that's a Neanderthal's tooth. So we've got at least 2 people buried in here. So we are seeing, we've got the opportunity to apply new scientific techniques, microscopic examination of the evidence, to look at the Selecki evidence. Are these guys human? Are they looking after people? Are they burying people? A lot of people say Neanderthals didn't bury their dead. And are they burying people with flowers? So those are the things we're trying to understand from looking at this new material. And you see in the middle base of that picture, it says soil micromorphology sample location. We're going to have a look at 2 of those now because they help us understand what's actually going on this site. So is it a burial? This is a soil micromorphology sample. There's a slide produced from it. So these are like the sand grains and the sediments that make up that soil. And you can see the upper third is quite brown and organic, whereas below it it's more white and grey and sort of more washed out looking. And so what you can see here is a complete and utter break in the sedimentation. So this does look like there is a burial taking place. It's not something that grades from one thing into another. The soil's been building up, building up, building up. Then someone's come along and scooped it off, and then they put back in a different sediment, which is similar. It's still got some of the same inclusions, but it's much more organic. You can see the sort of dark brown sort of splodges and things up within it. So looking at the soil in detail like this does seem to suggest that we've got a burial in situ. We also found underneath the bones themselves a chemical layer reflecting the breakdown of the body itself, which is very, very unusual to have in prehistory, mostly because people don't look for it. But because we work with sort of forensic archaeologists as well, we were able to see the bodies there and decomposed pretty much where we've got it. Were they buried with flowers? Well, when we started our work, we actually didn't really think that they were. It has to be said, we thought perhaps these flowers were brought in by animal burrows or so on, maybe even insects. And then after 2 years of working on the site, one of our pollen specialists actually suggested that, in fact, the flowers were contamination, that what the pollen came from was the sandals of the people who've been working in the site. So we thought, okay, right, we've solved that one. But then when we went to microscopic level, hopefully in this picture you can see those little round brown dots and black pieces on there. Those are actually pollen grains. And the brown black stripe above them and the blobby dark brown things beneath them are actually plant materials. So having thought, okay, job done, no flower burials, we have to step back and say, well, actually the science now suggests we do have in situ burial with flowers. And this, of course, is not the flower burial that's been excavated. This is a second example. So it's not just a one-off. It does seem to be something that Neanderthals are doing in this particular place at this particular time. Equally, we're looking at the stone tools, how they are making their living and so on. And the key word on this slide is that word that says Baradostian. That's meant to be the Upper Paleolithic. That's meant to be the industries made by modern humans. But as at this site, you can see on the right-hand side, it says start of early Baradostian is the bottom of the picture. Above that are two blue lines with bead next to them. You can see the beads, not very pretty beads, but there they are, beads nonetheless. And between those beads is an S5. That's a Shanidar Neanderthal. So it may well be that what we have is what we thought was modern humans inventing new technologies, a new way of life, and becoming the first wearers of decoration and jewelry. We've got a Neanderthal sitting right in the middle of it. Maybe Neanderthals invented it, because this is a really early example, or they are borrowing it from contemporary modern humans. But what they're not is brutal, thuggish animals who don't understand the more sort of artistic, humane elements of modern human society. So it may well be Neanderthals are participating either in modern human culture, or they are at least contributing to it from this evidence. They're also, it now seems, moving lovely raw materials across large areas of landscape. So the Baradostian obsidian, the stone tools being used is obsidian, which is a volcanic glass. It's black and shiny, translucent, beautiful stuff. And they're actually moving it across the mountains for over 200 kilometers. So they're valuing a prized raw material, and they're moving it around and across landscapes because they are valuing that raw material. It's not just they need to use it because there's nothing else. There's plenty of other materials they can use, but they value this material so much, they prefer to take it with them, and they're carrying it vast distances. So have we got humanity at Shanidar? Well, we have evidence for clear burials. So yes, we have a special place for special people. There were 4 injured people who were buried here, 2 infants and 3 who died unexpectedly young. So these aren't typical Neanderthals, if you like, in terms of being buried. They are people who are unusual in terms of their life histories, who are being buried in this one place. It's also worth bearing in mind, the cave floor is 1,000 square meters. We have 4 to 5 Neanderthals all buried on top of each other. They are actually coming back to not just the same cave, but the very same place to bury their dead over a long period of time. So again, they have an idea in their heads about the meaning of a place and a special location within that place for this sort of behavior. Flower burials, well, we confirmed we've got one, and we're now more likely to believe that the first one was also a flower burial. Do we have grave goods? Are they putting something in for the afterlife? Well, there's a suggestion of that. One of the Neanderthals we have found has a stone tool just by the hand. Now, whether that's circumstantial is debated. We don't know, but it's something we can look into. Is there care for the infirm? Certainly. There's a lot of evidence for that now. Art and decoration? Yes, we've got those beads. And we've got long distance exchange and movement. So far from being these thuggish, unintelligent subhumans, they seem to be at least as human as contemporary modern humans who were living in other parts of the world at the same time. Whilst this has been going on, it's also been discovered that Neanderthals were making art in Spain, in Iberia, and it predates the appearance of modern humans. This must be Neanderthals, because modern humans appear in this area about 43 to 40,000 years ago. Here, 64,000 years ago, there was no one else. It must have been Neanderthals. And you've got paintings on the walls. One of the paintings is actually a handprint. I don't know if you ever saw the Civilizations program on BBC, where Simon Sharma begins that whole trek, the whole journey into civilization by saying, this is the beginning. That handprint is a statement of humanity. This is a statement of identity. This is who I am. I identify myself. I'm a tool maker. I'm an artist. I'm a human. Well, the first person to do that wasn't perhaps a human in the same way that it was probably a Neanderthal. So, what is archaeology telling us? Where can we go with all this? Remember, archaeology is about the human past, and the material remains from it. So it's about people. It's a bit sententious to say any ape can reach for a banana, but only humans can reach for the stars. But that's exactly the story that archaeology can tell, and it's the only place you can get that story. Prehistory is 98% of human history, and there you go. This is it. This is where you can study it. This is where you can look at it. And we will cover this in various modules that you have a chance to take through your careers here at Birkbeck.